Welcome to the Triple D Podcast, Donuts, Disability, and Discourse, where host Michael Leiner talks to the best in the business about community, impact, business, and donuts. Here's your host, Michael Leiner.
Well, I want to welcome everybody to another episode of the Triple D Podcast. I have a guest that I'm really excited for a number of reasons to have on today, Lou Brossard. Do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit, Lou? Tell us what you do. And this is Epilepsy Awareness Month. We're in November now.
Right.
And I want you to share your story, if you
Okay.
can, with us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Honored to be here. My family story with epilepsy begins in 1995. The oldest of my three children, Nicholas, was diagnosed with epilepsy at the age of 3. And we were receiving terrific care through the Cleveland Clinic and pediatric neurologists, and for the most part, his seizures were prevented through medication,
Mm-hmm.
and that's typically how it works in most cases. So then a strange thing occurred when we were there for his 1-year annual visit. My daughter, the oldest of my two daughters, Devin, started having a petit mal seizure. And petit mal are they can vary in how they look, but with Devin, it just kind of looked like she was in a trance, and she was staring straight ahead, and her pupils were darting left and right, but she wasn't convulsing or anything like that. And so, and then fast forward to 2012, our youngest, our daughter Brenna, started epilepsy. She started having grand mal seizures while we were vacationing in New York City. And she was just shy of her 16th birthday at the time. So really, we're almost a case study because there is no evidence of epilepsy on either my side of the family nor my wife's.
Next question.
Yeah, so it's really just a strange occurrence to have two, let alone all three siblings have epilepsy at some point. So
Let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had guests on before who spoke about their experience with epilepsy, but what's unique about this, and just you sharing that you don't have a history, your wife doesn't have a history with epilepsy in your own medical past. What's it? I don't think I've ever asked this. What is it like being the parent of a child with epilepsy? When Nicholas had his first seizure, he was 3.
he was 3, right? It's terrifying, just to put it bluntly. It's you want to be able to protect your children at any cost, and this is something that you really have to rely on the experts for that. So at that point we just did our best to make sure that we learned about the do's and don'ts when a child starts having a seizure, and in your role as the parent or caregiver is simply to just make sure that they are protected, make sure that they have something soft under their head, a blanket or a pillow. Never put your hands in or near their mouth while they're having a seizure, and just let it ride out. And the general rule of thumb is don't call 911 unless this seizure has lasted for 5 minutes or longer.
Why is that? Why don't you want to call 911?
That's a great question. I never understood 5 minutes versus 3 minutes, 2 minutes.
Right.
For whatever reason, none of my kids ever had a seizure that lasted more than 2 to 3 minutes. So we never had to call 911 except for that very first time when Nicholas had his very first one at 3 years old. Because at that point we didn't know a thing about epilepsy.
Right.
So
when starting with Nicholas, and then you had some general awareness of, I imagine before Nicholas had a seizure, you probably had never dealt with that ever in your life.
Ever.
But then when your older daughter had her first seizure, did you feel like you were more prepared to deal with it? Like you knew what was happening? Was it something you were able to identify right away?
We did. You hit the nail on the head. We were prepared, even if it was just a mental toolbox kind of thing. It kind of took the panic out of the equation, having already gone through it with Nicholas. So, it wasn't, we all learned to just kind of be calm, cool, and collected and just make sure he or she were safe. And then, make sure that once they came out of it, you gave them time to come out of it and then talk through it with them afterward.
Now, did either of your older children grow out of seizures? Are they still taking medications?
So yes, and sort of. So my son, our son Nicholas, he outgrew epilepsy at age 12. And, he had to be, I believe it was 2 or 3 years seizure free in order for them to declare him he had grown out of it. So then fast forward to his freshman year of college, which he would have been 18 years old at the time. And then you're introduced to some common things with college, which would be...
What are those?
Stress,
books,
sleep deprivation. Yeah, books is thrown in there too, but stress, sleep deprivation, and they're drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
And so, sure enough, his epilepsy returned, which is somewhat. It's not common. It's also not rare. So since his 18th birthday, his freshman year of college at the University of Dayton, he's been on medication ever since.
Yeah.
And he just had his 32nd birthday yesterday.
Happy birthday.
So 14 years he's been living with epilepsy, and we've been told that he will likely have it for the rest of his life, but medication controls his seizures. And then my daughter, Devin, she outgrew it after 3 years, and she is now 29 years old, so she has been epilepsy free, since 1998, I believe.
See, I don't think you would be aware of this, but I had epilepsy as a child.
I did not know that.
And I've always assumed that a triggering event for it was I fell off of like a penny horse at Myers when I was a little kid in the Detroit area, and I had seizures until I was 12, and that's when they, same as Nicholas, that's when they declared me seizure free. And I haven't been on medications since that time, but when like I'll take my kids to like an amusement park or something like that, and they want me to go on the roller coasters with them, just out of like an overabundance of caution,
sure,
I won't do it.
Right.
And it's interesting how that like trickles into my adult life, even though it doesn't affect me day to day. I'm not taking medications. It's not something that when I'm driving around I'm scared of losing control of my car.
Sure.
But there's like little trepidations because a part of me remembers what it felt like when I was 6 years old, 8 years old, having these seizures and just feeling helpless.
Right.
Like they immobilized my speech. They made it so I couldn't talk. And I would have them when I was in my bed, in that little window between when you're awake and when you're asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have no way of alerting my parents that I was having. I would try to get myself to a wall, to bang myself into something and pray that my little brother a couple doors down would hear me.
Sure.
But but it's really interesting to hear the parental perspective, because I've never asked my mom or my dad what it was like for them. So to hear it from your perspective, having dealt with it with 3 children, is really illuminating for me, and I appreciate that.
Of course, yeah. And there were different levels of their epileptic seizures. So my son, as I said, his were grand mal in nature, and he always, at least when he was early, he convulsed pretty terribly. And then our daughter Devin, again, she would just kind of freeze up and look straight ahead. And then Brenna, our youngest, she would have something closer to Nicholas's seizures, very, very pronounced. And so we just kind of became professional experts on the subject, But there is, I understand what you're saying. There is some PTSD to it. There really is.
Yeah. And again, like, I'm fortunate that it's not a fear that I carry with me every day. I can't pretend, like, I can say this now because it's not something I drank to excess when I was in college, and did not have a particularly good sleep schedule, probably still to this day. So not all habits that I probably should follow, I followed, but there's certain things where I'm just like watching a lot of lights go by, or just the other night there, because it's Halloween season, my son got from somewhere these like goofy sunglasses where they just like, there's like neon lights that just blink, 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 blink. And I said, Dylan, you gotta put those away, man. Yeah. I cannot be around you while these things are going.
Strobing
so it's still,
effect, sure.
Yeah. So we've kind of started talking about your family story, but the story really continues.
It does, yeah. So, I would say the person of the three, Brenna was probably most affected by epilepsy just in her everyday life. And what I mean by that is every time she had a seizure, we were required to report it to her neurologist or epileptologist, which is a neurologist who specializes in just epilepsy. And so it was right around the time that she was getting her driver's license. And so every time she had a breakthrough seizure where it broke through the medication, she would have to forfeit her driving privileges for about 6 months at a time.
Yeah.
And that can be so disruptive to a new driver, as you might imagine. So it was just hers was just a little bit different than Nick and Devin's, and the story continues. Brenna was, for the most part, she was managing her epilepsy really well through medications, but she would have more breakthrough seizures, way more than Nick and Devin ever had. So she'd be on a medication or two, and then she'd be 2 years fine, but then she'd have a breakthrough seizure, and then they'd have to adjust levels of her current medications and or add a medication while removing another. So it was a constant, constant just tinkering with the medications. But she never had really long stretches of times where she was seizure free. So I think the longest stretch she ever had was 2 years, and then she'd have a breakthrough, and we kind of knew the drill, and we'd take her to see her neurologist, and they would recommend a new medication to the market or that kind of thing. So and then that got her up to college, and then she went to Ohio University along with my daughter Devin. And she seemed to have breakthrough seizures at a more frequent rate, and again, probably for everything that we already talked about.
What's a more frequent rate?
So it could be anywhere from 6 months to a year.
Okay.
Just when you think you're in the clear,
that's when it happens.
That's when it would happen, and we kind of have to start from scratch again. So. She was such a trooper. She was a lifelong gymnast, toughest 4'11" girl I've ever met in my entire life. And she never complained, and she just went with it, and she did what she needed to do because she really didn't want it defining her, and she didn't want it halting her progress, whether that's career progression, school progression, you name it. So we were very proud of her from that standpoint.
I've seen pictures of her, and she was beautiful, just a great smile. You could tell she was so full of life and energy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
She certainly was. I have bias, obviously, but she's got an army of friends, lifelong friends, that'll tell you the same thing.
Right.
Yeah. So, so then in January of 2022, she was really just thriving in her career. She was a business analyst for American Greetings Corporation, and she had a great group of friends. She was in a serious relationship, and really just beginning to grab the world and take it by storm.
Yeah.
And just out of nowhere, we got a call on Sunday, January 30th of 2022, from her two roommates. She was living in Lakewood on the lower level of a duplex, and got a call from her two roommates, who also happened to be grade school, high school, and college friends as well, that, hey, something's wrong with Brenna. And so, I broke a lot of land speed records getting over there with my wife, and when we got there, she was gone. And we didn't know why. We thought we were so prepared for anything that epilepsy might throw at her and us in the process. And so as we were planning her funeral, we decided that in lieu of flowers, we wanted to suggest donations to a charitable organization. And I said to Nick, hey Nick, Google Epilepsy Associations in Cleveland, Ohio. And guess which one came up? The Epilepsy Association of Cleveland. And so randomly, we had no affiliation, no knowledge of them whatsoever. We looked at their website. It just felt like a really grassroots type of organization, which appealed to us. So that's what we had printed in her obituary. And a week later, we got a call from the Epilepsy Association. They said, hey, we just want to introduce ourselves and let you know that we have received over $30,000 in donations in your daughter's memory, which just floored us. And so they invited us to come down and see their facility. And of course we did. It was myself, my wife Joni, and our daughter Devin. And one of the first things that the now retired executive director, Kelly, said to us was it SUDEP? And my wife and I just kind of looked at each other, and we looked at our daughter. It was a foreign term to us. We had no idea what SUDEP was. So then Kelly explained to us that SUDEP stands for Sudden Unexpected Death in Epilepsy. And it's kind of like, I equate it to SIDS for epilepsy. But the difference being is that, SIDS is for infants, whereas SUDEP can occur, it doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anyone living with epilepsy. And so once we found out about SUDEP, we also came to find out that there are a handful of things that you can do to potentially mitigate the risk of it occurring. So we were just kind of floored that at this point, this is 26 years of doctor visits between Nick, Devin, and Brenna.
You've never heard of
26 years, nobody informed us about SUDEP. And that isn't a point the finger of blame. It's just we looked at it as a really serious communication gap between doctor and patient. And so since then, it's been our life's mission to just bring SUDEP awareness to the epilepsy community, because we came to find out that it's kind of a taboo subject between the doctors and the patients. The doctors don't necessarily want to inform about SUDEP because they consider it to be rare. And so most national epilepsy organizations will tell you that the communication gap there are only about 30% of patients are hearing about SUDEP from their doctor, which is troubling. So,
What are those things that you can do to mitigate the risks of SUDEP? I want people to know this.
certainly. So a lot of it is common sense. You have to be compliant with your medication,
Okay.
or certainly first and foremost. That's why you're taking medication to prevent seizures, because SUDEP only happens during a seizure. All right, so the definition of SUDEP is the medical definition is that the brain will send a faulty signal to either the heart to stop beating or to the lungs to stop breathing. Okay, and so medication can help prevent it, and then all the things we talked about that don't happen in college. You need to get a good amount of rest every night, and if possible, you need to remove stressors from your life. And there are also things called seizure alert devices, and these are things that we also learned about after the fact. So, and the most popular one, and also the only one that's FDA approved, is the Embrace 2 watch, which looks very similar to an Apple Watch, only you wear it at bedtime, and it knows the difference between normal tossing and turning and seizure activity. And then when it detects that, it automatically, there's an app associated with it, it automatically dials the 3 phone numbers that you plugged into the app. And so within seconds of a seizure starting, your 3 designees are alerted instantaneously with a phone call and a text.
How much does one of those cost?
Roughly $350.
Okay.
And then the subscription for the app is $10 a month. So it doesn't, in most cases, it doesn't break the bank. And I can just tell you that with our son Nick, we have test simulated a seizure, and it works every time. It does exactly what it's intended to do. So the reason I'm spending a lot of time on the Embrace watch is because when Brenna passed away, she was living on the ground floor, and their bedrooms were situated side by side by side. And so if we had learned about SUDEP, I can tell you definitively that we would have done our research, and we would have asked, and we would have found out about these seizure detection and alert devices, and Brenna would have been wearing one. And instead, her 2 friends slept through her death.
How prevalent are the watches? I mean,
They're gaining a lot of prevalency. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't have numbers to pin to it, but I can tell you that through a lot of social media channels, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn, you can find a lot of information on the Embrace 2 watch, as well as other alert devices as well. There's devices that go between your mattress, and then they've got a blaring alarm that is linked up to it.
one of the things that you mentioned at the beginning that I kind of want to circle back to is, this general rule of thumb that unless a seizure is longer than 5 minutes long, you don't call an ambulance, you don't call 911. I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this question, because it sounds like the roommates on each side of her were asleep, but does anybody know how long she was having a seizure for when she passed?
No, but just based on our previous experience, her seizures generally lasted 2.5 to 3 minutes long. And, here's the thing. The one thing I failed to mention about Nick and Brenna's epilepsy, when they have a seizure, they always occurred in the middle of the night. And that's a problem, because to be able to prevent SUDEP and to be able to give life-saving measures, you have to witness the seizure. And so that, middle of the night, that's a problem, hence the device.
Even just thinking about my own story,
Mhm.
thankfully, like I said, seizure-free for almost, 25 years or more now, but it was in that exact window of time. I'm in my bed at night, and there's not people there to witness it when they would come. I'll tell you what I would like to do, by the way, and hopefully you guys can help me facilitate this. I want to donate the money to the EA so that 5 of those watches can be purchased if they're $350 a
Fantastic,
piece. And I assume you guys, because I know that there's people that are engaged with the Epilepsy Association who
Mhm.
could benefit from those watches but maybe don't have the money. Is that something that we could help facilitate if I just wrote a check for that?
That would be amazing. And I know that there are people who might not be able to afford it, who are receiving other resources from the Epilepsy Association. So that would be just incredible.
Okay,
And,
we'll
and
do
in the
that.
process, I can assure you that you are likely potentially helping to save lives.
Yeah.
So,
Now you've shared, this awful story, and you've kind of told us how you came to the Epilepsy Association, but
yeah.
you've been active in Columbus like this.
Right.
Tell us about that.
I will, thank you. I'm lucky in the fact that I participate in local politics. I'm the city council president in North Olmsted. So, based on my city politics affiliation, I've been able to partner with some politicians, legislators, I should say, at the state level. And so one of the things that was important to us early on was, hey, we need to bring more awareness around SUDEP, because if there's more people out there like our family who went through 26 years of doctor visits and were never once informed about SUDEP, then there's certainly others. And so last year we were able to pass through the House and the Senate in Ohio. It's called Brennan's Law. And so every October 26th, so we just observed it 2 days ago, every October 26th is SUDEP Awareness Day in Ohio. And through social media channels and written literature, you can learn more about SUDEP. And again, you can learn more about the small handful of things that you can do to try and help prevent it from occurring. So that was our first legislative effort, and it was successful. But then we started thinking on bigger terms. Why aren't doctors talking about SUDEP with their patients? And again, the best answer that we always get is we don't want to unnecessarily worry and have people living in fear when it's considered a rare occurrence. Current statistics say that 1 in 1,000 people with epilepsy will die from SUDEP. Most national reputable organizations believe that SUDEP is very much underreported because medical examiners aren't trained on how to look for SUDEP, so they default to things like asphyxiation, heart attack, so on and so forth. So, but most people think it's closer to 4 or 5 out of 1,000. So that's a big jump. So we just wanted to do whatever we could to bridge that communication gap again that we think occurs between doctor and patient. So my state representative is Bride Rose Sweeney, and she's out of Westlake. And I approached her at a political event, and my wife was there with me, and we told her our story, and we asked if she would be interested in writing legislation that would require doctors treating at-risk patients to inform them about SUDEP in both verbal and written form. And she said, absolutely, I'm all on board. She said that with tears in her eyes. So we're so grateful to her for doing this. And then We also got a prominent co-sponsor to the bill, Tom Patton, and so it was introduced to the House of Representatives, and it was really an eye-opening experience for me, though, because I'm so used to city politics where if somebody introduces a piece of legislation, you're automatically required to assign it to a committee. That committee is required to hold a hearing, and then in 99 times out of 100, it passes through committee so that the entire body of city council can weigh in on it. And so almost always it'll end up with a vote. And things don't necessarily work that way at the state level. So once the bill is introduced, it does get assigned to a committee, but the committee chairperson is under no obligation to hold hearings on it, let alone a vote on it. And so we really had to work very hard to convince the committee chair to hold hearings on it. And so he did. And we're so grateful for that because, and then at that point, I went down and I testified before the committee. It was the Senate Health Services Committee. I'm sorry, the House Health Services Committee. And we had hearings on it. And then at that point, they're not required to hold a vote on it either, but he did. He held a vote in committee. It passed through committee. I believe it was 13-1 vote. And then
who votes against this?
I'm
you don't need to name a name.
going to be politically correct on that answer, so I'm not going to answer.
Okay.
But I couldn't agree with you more. Like, why would you vote no on something that could potentially help save a life?
Right.
And that costs nothing. You know, communication costs nothing. It's free. So anyhow, passed through the House Committee 13-1, and then again, the Speaker of the House is not obligated to hold a vote on it for passage, but he did. And so on January 10th of this year, I drove down to Columbus, and I was just in awe of the rotunda for the House, and they held a vote on it, and it passed 91-0.
All right. So it changed their mind that time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there was one abstain, and it was I think it was that same representative, but that's okay. So once it passed through the House, then it got the process starts all over in the Senate. So since January 11th, it has been assigned to the Senate Health Committee, and as of yet, they have not held a hearing nor voted on it. And so we're getting a little nervous because this General Assembly ends December 31st. And so if it doesn't pass by December 31st, the whole process has to start all over again.
Right.
And we don't want to do that. We will if we have to, but certainly we don't want to do that. So we've been very active with the phones, we've been very active with the email, requesting a hearing, and you know, things just work differently in Columbus. You know, it could get lumped together with a bunch of other non-controversial bills, and they could pass it that way so that they don't necessarily have to have, you know, 10 different hearings for 10 different bills. So we're hopeful that's why, we're hopeful that it's being sandbagged at this time, and that they're just kind of waiting for the right moment to add it to some other non-controversial bills. But certainly if you have any connections in Columbus.
I wish I did. in my world, it's all federal.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well,
believe me,
I'd
if
be
I
remiss
did,
if I didn't ask.
Yeah, no. You got to ask everybody you know.
Right. So, but again, you know, if we have that unfortunate set of events where it just doesn't, it dies in committee, in the Senate committee, then we will just start all over again, and we will just hit it harder this time. That's all. And that's not to say we haven't hit it hard this time, because I assure you we have. So
It'll succeed in the end. I'm optimistic
I appreciate
about
that. And this one, by the way, it's HB 229, House Bill 229, and it's called the Lou Brossard SUDEP Awareness Act. All right, so
Okay.
that's the official title of the legislation.
Well, you know what might help, and this is, one thing that's cool about all these platforms that I have out there on social media is anybody who's watching this or listening to us that has a connection
Right.
can serve a purpose that you and I can't. So that's one of the things that I love about the social media world is I am amazed by the people that I find out are listening to, our podcast or seeing what we're putting up on TikTok and Instagram, and the things that it's accomplished. So hopefully somebody hears this and is able to make a call or shoot a text to somebody who can help, further this down the road.
That would be wonderful. And they can also write or email or call any member of the Senate Health Committee and just give them a nudge saying, hey, we believe in this, and maybe you don't have all the information. What can we tell you? Yeah, that would be great. It's kind of funny you mentioned social media because prior to Brenna's passing, I was a typical middle-aged man.
What does that mean?
Well, I feel like most middle-aged men don't embrace social media. They think that LinkedIn is the end-all be-all to social media, right? And I was in that group. And so after she passed, I just recognized the power of these other social media channels. And so now I'm active on Facebook, now I'm active on Instagram and TikTok in addition to LinkedIn.
There you go.
Yeah.
You know what? I've broadened my horizons quite a bit in the last year or so as well. Same thing. It's just the reach that's out there. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And when the name of the game is awareness, there's no better way to do it.
Yeah.
And this is you're on the board of the Epilepsy Association.
Right.
And this is, again, we're kind of coming back. It's Epilepsy Awareness Month, and this is the month of the big gala.
Yeah, November 8th at the Metropolitan at the 9. It'll be the 33rd annual gala. And it's just a wonderful, amazing event where all stakeholders come together, and certainly it's an evening to have formal dress attire and great music and great food, but it's where we get to celebrate the prior year's efforts in raising awareness and helping the community, members of the community who are living with epilepsy, have resources that they didn't know they had available to them, whether they're underprivileged or not. And so we're very much looking forward to the gala. I already told you about SUDEP Awareness Day. It was 2 days ago. We have 4 events throughout the course of the year that are just amazing, and they're so well attended, and they're just getting bigger in scope year in and year out. And I have been fortunate as a board member. I have been the chairperson of the Winter Walk the last 2 years. And so, that occurs, as it sounds, that occurs in January.
Sounds cool.
We don't walk outside. We walk inside at South Park Mall in Strongsville. And I think it's a 2.5 mile walk, so several loops around. And, when I first started, we were averaging about 250 people for that. And now it's grown to over 400 people.
Wow.
And so, it feels really good to give back to the epilepsy community, and that's why I do this. It's just so, as you might imagine, it's so near and dear to every member of my family.
Of course.
So,
Of course.
by the way, just a quick plug. My son and his wife Marissa just had our first grandchild.
Oh, you're a grandpa.
I am, a week and a half ago.
Well,
And so-
congratulations.
thank you.
Congratulations. How does it feel to be a grandfather?
It's amazing. Everybody told me in leading up to his birth that it's just the greatest joy that you can ever imagine. And I just wondered if that was overhype. It's not. It's amazing. So
Well, and now that your children aren't in your house anymore, I imagine you can throw yourself into a baby, which is a blessing.
absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
great.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
great.
So
Well, I'm so glad that you came and spent some time with me today, Lou, and shared your story.
Thank you.
It motivates me, obviously, but other people as well. So I hope you keep telling it and keep doing the great work that you're doing with the Epilepsy Association
thank
and
you so
beyond.
much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Triple D Podcast, Donuts, Disability, and Discourse. Rate, subscribe, and tune in next week for more discourse and donuts.